Good morning, Sean here, Mountains Garage. I got some more parts in for the ZZ383. Today we're going to assemble and adjust the valve train.
I found a push rod in the correct length right on the shelf. There wasn't that many available in the country, but they weren't bad, priced about $44. They were listed in the picture as being one piece, but they're actually ball end. But for what I'm doing, that'll be okay. I'm not sure this is the look I'm going for, but these are some valve covers that I had laying around. They're brand new, old stock, missed the gasket. The headers are another set of eBay stainless. They come with no listing, but they seem to fit the chassis pretty well, which on a Nova, the steering box, the driver's side is the hard side. Most headers warn that they will not fit with angle plug heads, so I knew I was taking a chance when I ordered angle plug heads, because not only do they angle in, they angle down, but the passenger side, we got no problems at all. I have to reclock my starter or dent the header because they ran into each other. But I got one more adjustment on the starter, so I'll just move it in toward the block. And this side should be okay. And cylinders 5 and 7 on this side have tons of room. I say these headers tuck right in, and I've held them up in the chassis. And they seem to clear, but when we get to number 1 and number 3, I actually had to put that plug in before I bolted the header on because it runs right into it. And this side will technically clear the wire if I go down and around. And the header runs into the motor mount, so I got to do a little bit of clearance in right there. Back to the valve train. Step 1, I put lube on top of all the lifters where the push rod's going to ride. Same story with the top of the push rod, the threads, and the top of the valves. It's important to note, later model stuff, they're guided rockers, so the wheel on either side would have a guide to hold it centered on the tip. In the traditional stuff, you actually have a push rod guide plate, and the holes are large enough that you can move that around to manipulate how the rocker rides on the valve. If you don't, if you just bolt them down, they're going to be probably pushing, you can get them out halfway off the valve. So it only takes a second to kind of manipulate it and make it so it looks like it relaxes over the center of the valve. Time for a valve lash adjustment. If this was a stock camshaft, you can place the engine on TDC, number 1 firing position, and you can adjust 8 rockers. It's published in most every manual. Then you can spin the crank 1 turn, so you're actually in number 6 cylinder firing position, and adjust the other 8. As camshafts grow, the most accurate method, if you do a lot of reading with popular engine builders, is exhaust open, intake closing procedure, which is what I'm going to do. When the exhaust rocker begins to go up, I'm going to adjust the intake. When the intake fully opens and starts to close, I'm going to do the exhaust. I'm going to do it 1 cylinder at a time. You can chase the firing order around, but I'm used to sitting on the tire over here with the front end off my drag car and just going right down the line. You have to turn it over a few more times, but I don't care. So I'm going to do 1 cylinder at a time. Exhaust open, intake closing procedure. And the ZZ383 paperwork with the factory Chevy lifters says 1/2 a turn beyond 0 lash. If you have aftermarket lifters like Moral or different brand names, you have to read their paperwork or study their website. They go by the thread pitch, and often it's only 1/8 to 1/4 beyond 0 lash. If you go 1/2 or 3/4 or whatever you want to do, you're going to leave the valve hanging open and not have any compression in that cylinder. If you have solid lifters, this is when you'd use the feeler gauge between the roller and the tip of the valve. Same procedure, just instead of going beyond 0 lash, you're setting lash with a feeler gauge. This is me sliding the guide plate, and you can see how you can optimize it. I just put it where I like it, and then gently lift the rockers off and torque her down. I like to tighten the set screw and then grab the Allen wrench and the wrench at the same time and tighten them both a little bit. That way it's doubly tight. 20 years ago, an aluminum roller rocker arm wouldn't be clearanced for large valve springs. Now they pretty much all are. This will clear a 1625 spring probably. I don't have that big, so I got miles of room, but it's an area to check so your valve spring retainer doesn't hit on your rocker arm. Time for the stud girdle. I'm going to do some measuring that's non-critical, but both my end exhaust valves are closed, and I just set a couple machinist parallels to hold the stud girdle off the rockers. You don't want the rocker hitting the stud girdle. A paint stick would work just fine. Break it in half and put one under each end, or you can just eyeball this if you want to, but you know me, I'm going to measure it somehow. So I just stuck a couple parallels in there, and now I'm going to just tighten up the 4 bolts that hold the 2 halves together. It's not necessary to have the intake manifold off, but in this case I haven't installed it yet, and it allows me to watch the lifters going up and down and the plunger in the lifter when I depress it. I find it a lot more accurate. I also, in my final act of adjusting the valves, I watch the intake valve close on the number 1 cylinder, and then I roll the engine to 10 degrees before top dead center, and now I'm ready to install my distributor when the time comes. This is about as tall as a small block Chevy valve cover gets, and despite of that, the baffle still hits the stud girdle. Fortunately, in this case, the rocker arms, instead of the oil squirting out of them straight up, is redirected toward the middle, and my stud girdle effectively becomes my baffle. The idea of the baffle is to keep from squirting oil into your PCV tract or out your breather. In this case, I will have a PCV valve. For the 98% of the time I'm not at full throttle, it'll be working to evacuate the crankcase vapor. And that other 2%, well, the breather will handle it. And as a reminder, if you're running the PCV valve in one valve cover, you need a breather on the other, and that's drawing in fresh air. You're sucking it out on one side, and you got to draw it in out of the other. So the Valvetrain is complete, ready to run. The stud girdle is worth the hassle. It's really not even much of a hassle. I love how it ties it all together, and not only did I lock the Allen screw and then turn them both together to double lock it, this is also squeezing on the adjuster, so there's no chance of it backing off. And it's tying the entire cylinder head together, strength-wise. Again, this is not a large lift camshaft. It's above stock, but it's not, 800 or more lift like a race motor would be. It's just over 500. So it's overkill in this situation, but it doesn't bother me a bit. These stud girdles, eBay specials, I think the Speedmaster, they're like $35 with the nuts, and they're actually nice quality. So I'll use them. I did not cheap out on the rocker arms themselves, but the stud girdle is not too much to go wrong. Seems like an okay piece. I'll call it as I see them. If something's junk, I won't use it, and I'll call it out. If it seems usable, so be it. That's going to wrap up the Valvetrain video. I'm waiting for some valve cover studs and some decent intake manifold bolts. I bought enough for all 3 engines plus. It's cheaper to buy in bulk. It's hard to believe with all the junk I got laying around here that I'm not happy with 8 valve cover fasteners and 12 intake manifold bolts. But I never found anything I like the looks of. When it comes to fasteners, I learned this from building Harleys. Don't buy anything chrome plated, because as soon as you, like a Allen head chrome bolt, as soon as you tighten it up, you've scratched the inside where your tool went, and as soon as that gets wet, it's nothing but a piece of rust and looks like, well, So stainless steel or anodized is good. Plain steel, gonna rust. I also like to clear coat the entire engine. They make clear coat engine paint, so when I'm done, I paint everything, except for the carburetor. Sometimes I paint the carburetor, but in clear. I think it lasts over time. It does kind of yellow slightly after a while, but it beats the alternative of every exposed surface. Like the cylinder head, you clean the entire deck. The head doesn't cover the entire deck, so everything exposed is just going to turn to rust.
clear coat it, it looks like you just did it. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.